Okay, so as a driving instructor, people often ask me what first car would you buy? And having just been through that process with my own daughter, I thought I'd make a video summarising our journey and our thought processes, so that next time somebody asks me that question, instead of repeating myself, I can merely ping them this video link. Now, when most people ask me that question, what they're really looking for is a simple two-word answer, a life hack answer, either Ford Fiesta, Volkswagen Polo, Vauxhall Corsa, Alfa Romeo Mito, Hyundai i120, etc., etc. And so if a life hack answer is what you're looking for, this isn't the video for you. Cars, by their very nature, are quite complex bits of kit. Got an owner's manual there, over 300 pages long. So when you actually get into it, cars in a range and the elements within that range are quite complex. So by default, they take a bit of time and a bit of detail to consider them properly, which is what we'll attempt to do in this video. Now, I'm told if you're going to make a longer YouTube video, you need to put some sort of hook in up front to keep your audience engaged to watch to the end of the video. And so the hook I'll give you on this one is the statistic that outside of medical nasties, that can befall any of us, a car or a motorbike is statistically the thing most likely to end a young person's life prematurely. And so having done the medical nasty thing with my own daughter and stood there helplessly, as doctor said she was unlikely to live through the night, and as a father feeling completely helpless, I had to put my complete faith in the medical professionals and what they could do for my daughter, and thankfully they delivered very well for me. But cars are my thing, and where my knowledge base has been built up over a number of years, so this is where I'm not helpless, and so the guidance I can give my daughter will hopefully keep her safe. So the driver training and her selection of cars as a new driver is something hopefully that I can give to her, and is what I try to share here with anyone else who's interested to listen. Okay, so if that all sounded a bit doom and gloom, the other thing I have managed to retain, despite the challenges that parenthood brings with it, is an acute memory of my very first car, and the smiley face and the experience and the sense of freedom that a first car gives you. So I've always retained that love of cars, so I can remember vividly being 17 and the experiences and all the fun stuff you do with your friends at that time. So this is very much, and it was great going on that process with my own daughter, you know, listening to her hopes and dreams, and it's been a sort of healthy tension in our decision-making process. It's the bits that Dad wants relative to the bits that a teenage girl wants in a car. So we stayed in the problem and we batted it back and forth, and you know, we've arrived at a decision that was right for us. So hopefully what we can share here are the elements that we considered, and you may find that useful when constructing your checklist. Okay, so until we progress to fully autonomous vehicles, the single biggest thing to help a young driver remain safe on the road is to get them some good quality driver training. Now, naturally, I would say that I'm a driving instructor, that's how I make my living, but most of the people who watch my videos don't actually pay for lessons with me. So that is just freely given good advice. Whoever you learn to drive with, make sure your child has had enough driver training. It's really important to understand and remember that the driving test, while a fantastic achievement, is the minimum base level requirement to allow you to operate independently, and there is still an awful lot of development work that needs to go on. So supporting your child through the post L-Test phases is really important. There are schemes such as Pass Plus, which you can do with a driving instructor, or other organisations, charitable organisations, road safety organisations such as IAM Road Smart, or ROSPA, which are staffed by volunteers who give their time very freely. They're highly qualified people, and drivers, and they share their experience willingly to help young drivers develop. So by far and away, the single biggest thing is make sure your child is fully prepared for their driving and hasn't just life hacked their driving test. There are some tests in life you want to get through as easily as possible, others you want to be fully prepared for. So that would be my first piece of advice. But then once we get beyond that, we have to accept that novice drivers are statistically more likely to make errors of judgment as they learn and develop. And so it's at that point when things do go wrong that you want to be looking to the safety features that come with that car, with any particular car you're considering. And if we start at, I guess, the worst case scenario of when a collision does occur, there's an organisation called Euro NCAP. And I'll put details of this up on the screen and in the link below. But Euro NCAP crash test every new car, and they give it a simple 5-star rating to make it consumer friendly. You can compare like for like cars on a 5-star rating scale, depending on how they performed in terms of driver protection, passenger front and rear protection, pedestrian protection, and so on and so forth. So when you've narrowed down your consideration set to the cars you like, the ones you like the look of, that type of thing, the first thing I would recommend doing is just seeing where they score on the Euro NCAP rating. The only thing to mention there is that the Euro NCAP rating has been evolved over years. Clearly they're looking, what was safe 10 years ago. We've moved technology and safety standards forward. So it can be difficult to compare like for like now. But typically the cars you will be exploring will come from a certain era, depending on whatever your budget is. So within your budget and what year model of car that buys you, you can at least compare quite directly with the 5-star scale with other cars in your consideration set. But for example, a more modern cars now have things such as radar braking, and so a car that 10 years ago was scoring 5 stars on the Euro NCAP crash testing scoring, because 10 years later it lacks the new technology, it wouldn't score the same score in today's world, if that makes sense. But broadly speaking, if you're comparing cars from an era, so 2010 generation cars, if you're going to compare a Ford Fiesta with a Volkswagen Polo or Corsa, you can see how each of those cars performs. So continuing the sort of Euro NCAP crash test theme, also look at the protection elements that come with your specific the specific car you're looking at. It's important to remember that obviously cars have ranges. I think with any marketing they have value laddering, and so base level models may not be of the same specification as models higher up the range. So just check how many airbags, for example, a car has. Typically they'll have driver and front passenger airbags. Higher up the range, you will have curtain and side airbags, and it's other simple pieces of technology such as the head restraints and seat belts. In the lower models, middle head restraints will be left out for cost savings and things like that. So look at the specific car you are buying, not just the broad range, because clearly the marketeers sell on their top brand offering. Just check that the specific car you are considering as a second-hand car has those safety features included in it. Okay, so this section is what I would term see and be seen. And so it's those elements of the car which enable the driver to see out and see other things, and to see at night. And then the factors which help the car be seen by other road users. So things such as daytime running lights. So we'll come on to look at each of those in a bit more detail, but that's what this category is about, this section of the video is about. And the changes to the Highway Code, which came into force on the 29th of January this year, 2022, puts an even higher onus of responsibility on the driver of cars to take care around vulnerable road users, such as pedestrians and cyclists. So our ability to see those vulnerable road users is more important than ever. And so every car will have blind spots by virtue of its design, but some designs are better than others in terms of minimizing those blind spots. So the A pillar here, section here, blocks out a whole chunk of vision, which you can easily lose a pedestrian in. And then similarly over shoulder rear view visibility out of the back of the car, and some designs are better than others in terms of the blind spots they create. So clearly moving ahead is very, very important, and we do all of that in driver training, but the design of the car can have a bearing on how easy or otherwise it is to see over your shoulder in both directions through the rear windscreen. So those are factors in terms of C that would be high on my priority list for a young driver. Now, some of these elements will come down to the car design. So sportier car designs with sloping roofs by design can often compromise rearward vision, and the DVSA driving test centres actually have a list of cars which are not allowed to be presented for driving test in, and many of those are refused to be able to do a driving test in it because of their poor rearward vision. So I'll put a link to that list and just have a look, see what the DVSA's view would be on that, and make your own decisions around that point. Okay, so another factor to consider in the be seen element of a car's appearance will be its colour. And there's quite a bit of research into this and quite a bit of insurance industry research into this, so I won't go into lots of detail here. I'll put some links in the description if you want to read around the subject in more detail. But various factors of a car's colour will influence how we perceive speed and distance. So at a top line level, black cars are often perceived, they're harder to see, and their size and shape, the colour distorts our perception of that. So speed and distance judgments of black cars have been shown in research to be harder to judge. Similarly, lighter colour cars could potentially get lost on a grey skyline, and yet some of the research would suggest that lighter cars perform better because they're highly visible both day and night. So have a read around the research in detail. The conclusion we came to, which was a combination of clearly the aesthetics and the colour choices we liked, and which we thought was a safe colour, we chose a red car, which scored well in terms of its visibility. And also within the context of the UK market, where we have a preference for white and silver grey type cars, in a stream of traffic of grey and white cars, a red car, to our logic, would stand out and be more obvious, so we're more likely to be seen by other road users. So continuing that be seen theme, since 2011, any new car sold in Europe has had to have what are called daytime running lights. And so these are the very bright LED lights that you'll see on the front of a car. And they are designed not to illuminate the road ahead, but to make the car more visible to other road users and vulnerable road users, pedestrians, cyclists. So the bright lights in a bright daylight context are designed to make the car more visible and attract attention to that vehicle. So this car, we'll go around to the front of the car now and just have a quick look, but this car has LED daytime running lights. If your car predates 2011 and doesn't come fitted with daytime running lights, it is relatively simple to retrofit daytime running lights. We've got some videos actually where we've done that to some of our older cars to enhance their safety. What I would say on that point, if you are going to do that or get somebody to do it for you, make sure you are getting an MOT certified installation. There are a lot of cheap imported products which do not conform to road regulations, so you're wasting your time and money by putting cheap kit on, but get a decent set from one of the reputable manufacturers which will be E-marked, and the lenses have to be marked. So again, we'll put some links in the description so you can get a bit more detail on that. But if you're buying older cars, it's a pretty useful safety feature to retrofit. Okay, so these are the LED daytime running lights on this car. As I say, they are designed to make the car more visible during daylight hours, and they become the pretty styling face of a car, and that car designers have loved to incorporate. But their intended purpose is very much to make the car more visible to other road users. So that's very much the be seen element that lighting function it serves. And then at night time, our other lights that we need to consider perform the role of being able to see. So they're another very important consideration. Now, come a bit closer and just have a look at the lights and details. So this car actually has the headlamp upgrade on this model. So this has what are called bi-xenon headlamps. So that's this section here. And in addition, this particular car has halogen bulbs for cornering lights as well. So it's got quite a sophisticated lighting setup there, but this was quite an expensive option on that car. Now, it's obviously important to be able to see well at night, though if you're balancing a limited budget, I think this is an area where you can compromise slightly if you are being sensible, because as I say, bi-xenon headlamps will be more expensive, and you can get some perfectly good halogen light bulbs. And the other thing is, if you're driving sensibly and in accordance with Highway Code Rule 126, driving at a speed that would allow you to stop well within the distance that you can see to be clear, if your headlamps aren't particularly far-ranging, it will encourage you to drive at a slower speed during nighttime hours. So as long as you're being sensible and driving within the limitations of your lights, having halogen light bulbs is not a problem at all. So a lot of older cars will be specified with halogen light bulbs, and they will be quite adequate. With that, you do have, with basic halogen light bulbs, if that's what your car comes with, there are some upgrades. You can do some simple upgrades, and again, get road legal upgrades. There are lots of silly things on the internet, dangerous blinding upgrades, but if you get one from a reputable manufacturer such as the Osram Nightbreaker or Philips to a similar bulb, you can increase the brightness of standard halogen headlights. The only thing just to be aware with these type of bulbs, they burn a little brighter, shine a little brighter, but as a consequence of that, they don't last quite as long. So if you're going to upgrade one, I would suggest you leave your dipped headlight bulbs as standard manufacturer's bulbs and put a brighter light in your high beam, because if the bulb should burn out, you then aren't leaving yourself in an awkward position. So the high beam you use less frequently, but when you want it, you want that increased brightness. So that's a cost-effective, simple upgrade you can do if you aren't going to go to the extent of having bi-xenon and similar LED technology, or LED technology as in more modern cars. Okay, so it actually started to rain while we were filming this, which reminded me of another important feature that I'd forgotten to mention in terms of the see and be seen category, and that's clearly your windscreen wipers. So make sure your car is fitted with some windscreen wipers. That's great advice, Phil. But if you can see here, these are fitted with more modern blade style windscreen wipers, which are just sort of pretty straight blades, as the name would suggest. So we just switch those off. If your car was fitted with an older type, let's switch those wipers off. If your car comes fitted with an older type of windscreen wiper arm, with these little metal joints, nothing at all wrong with that, and they're quite functional. But when they wear out, obviously the rubber blades will wear out in time, and also as the car gets older and sits out and things go a little bit rusty, these metal pivot joints can become stiff, and then they don't push the blade smoothly across the windscreen surface. And so for that reason, on more modern cars, we've gone over to the blade type technology. And just so a tip, if you are buying an older car, a simple safety upgrade is to convert to something like the Bosch Aero Twin blade style wipers, which is compatible with the old style hook or umbrella hook wiper arm, as it was known. So if you've got that type of old school wiper on your car, and it's getting a little bit of old and in need of change, if it's smearing and not really clearing your windscreen, that would be a really simple upgrade for safety. And the other thing is to always use a quality screen wash to work in combination with your wipers, to make sure it's the wipers move smoothly across the screen, clear the screen, and remain liquid in cold and freezing conditions. So I've got a more detailed video on that if you want to know how to top your screen wash up and how to dilute from concentrate. I'll put a link in the description for that one. Okay, so if you ask any driver what's the most important element of a car, they will tell you that it's the car's tyres and the car's brakes. So before really looking at anything else, check the specific car that you're buying has got some decent tyres and some decent brakes on it. And conversely, a lot of people get very excited about the size of the wheel itself. And in the UK, we seem to have an obsession with upgrading to larger wheels. But as a new driver, just be aware in terms of the cost of motoring. If you've got a larger wheel, generally that will mean that the tyres you wrap around it are more expensive. And unfortunately, the trade-off people often make, they want the bling wheels, and then they discover they can't afford the tyres. So they compromise on the quality of their tyres, which is absolutely the wrong thing to be doing as a young driver, or as any driver. Where you want to be spending your money is on quality A-wet rated tyres. And as you will have learnt from your driving test preparation, you want to check that the tyre tread depth, well, for your driving test, you will have learnt the legal minimum is 1.6 millimeters. Most road safety organisations would suggest that 3 millimeters is the safe legal minimum to avoid aquaplaning risks. The other thing to look at would be the tyre's date stamp. It's a 4-digit code to see how old the tyres are. So again, I'll put some more details in the description there. And again, it's the old adage that no car ever leaves its manufacturer's factory on an odd mix and match of tyre makes and brands. So you're really looking for a car that's sitting on 4 tyres of the same type, or at the very least paired axle pairs, so either the front 2 tyres are the same and the 2 rears would be the minimum sort of requirement you're looking at there for safety. Okay, so the brakes that come fitted to any car should be more than capable of stopping the car of that mass. And clearly the engineers and designers who do that are much better qualified to do that. But the key thing is just to check that the brakes have been correctly serviced, and obviously get a professional to give you guidance on that. Just because a car has an MOT test, which was done 12 months ago, potentially any time within the last 12 months, doesn't mean it's currently correct. So get that checked if you don't know what you're looking for yourself. And the other area that's often skipped on service regimes, because it's an optional item, is your brake fluid. So on your driving test, you'll have learnt to identify that this is the brake fluid reservoir and whether it has enough fluid in it. Another quick check is if you carefully remove the cap and have a look down into it, fresh brake fluid should be a light yellowy colour, so a wee type colour is probably the best analogy. If that's looking very dark and brown, it suggests that the brake fluid hasn't been changed that frequently, and so it can absorb water and moisture, which can cause rotting of the brake pipes from inside, but also in extreme cases can cause the brakes not to function as they were intended. So it's a pretty simple check. Just check the colour of the brake fluid. What are you looking at? Okay, so since 2005, any new car sold in Europe has had to be fitted with an anti-lock braking system, or an ABS braking system. And so there's our brake fluid reservoir, and over here, if we follow the pipework over, there's a pump and an electronic control unit which provides ABS braking and other associated electronic stability control features, which we'll come on to talk about. But for a young driver, I would say ABS braking is a key criteria. So if you're looking at cars before 2005, just check that it was fitted with ABS. And if it wasn't, and you're a new driver and haven't had experience of driving cars without ABS, I'd think very carefully about buying that particular car. Okay, so as we said, from 2005, any new car sold in Europe must come with a basic anti-lock braking system. But the clever people at Bosch and other system manufacturers have now extended the capability of what anti-lock braking systems can do. So effectively, the ABS pump and control unit has sensors on each of the 4 wheels. So if any of those wheels starts to rotate faster than any of the other wheels, the system can adjust individual braking. So it's a very clever piece of technology. And that can also be extended to electronic stability programs. And so again, as a novice driver, you have a higher probability of making an error of judgment in terms of speed and the tightness of a bend. And so in those situations, if you do make an error of judgment, the electronic stability program can attempt to assist you in that, because it clearly states here in the manuals, these systems can't overcome the laws of physics. So if you're driving recklessly, these systems aren't a save all catch all situation. It is for those days when you make a genuine mistake, and the system will attempt to give you a second chance. But don't misunderstand what the technology can do. It doesn't mean that you can drive recklessly, as it says very clearly in the owner's manual. The other feature that this car came with, which was highly relevant to our consideration set, was what's called the brake assist system, and it will vary. The name will vary by manufacturer, but in this case it's a brake assist system, and you're trained on your driving test to do the emergency stop. And very simplistically, we get our foot on the brake pedal as hard and as fast as we possibly can, and we keep it there. We keep it planted to the carpet. And that's the bit, as humans, a lot of research was shown that people weren't doing that. So either they were getting a vibration through the pedal as a result of the anti-lock braking system, thinking, oh, blimey, I've broken my brakes, and we're easing off the pressure, or they fundamentally weren't pushing it hard enough. And clearly we'll all vary in physical size. Now a car is designed for any able-bodied adult to be able to push with enough force, but it does require pressure to be kept on there. And brake assist, what it will do is it will recognise an emergency braking action. So if the pedal is depressed rapidly and firmly, it will then, the systems kick in and apply maximum braking force. So again, it was a useful feature, and particularly in our consideration set, it was highly relevant to the needs of our driver. So that was one of the key things on our requirement list. But more modern cars will have even more sophisticated systems. So again, when you're balancing a budget and where you're spending, just think about what your needs are and where your priorities lie. Okay, so the other key thing which varies throughout a car model range will be the size and type, fuel type, and power output of the car's engine. And that has quite a key bearing on safety. And that actually works in both ways. The sort of common misperception is, oh, it's a young motorist, let's give them a really low powered engine, so they can't get themselves into trouble. I think you've got to find a middle ground there. And again, it comes back to making sure that whatever car they're driving, they have been trained and are familiarised with a car of that level of power. But then also have a look at what your driving needs will be. So some of the very small city cars with particularly low-powered engines and particularly fuel-efficient engines are really just suitable for city driving. So if all you're doing is in your local area, popping around into local areas, they'll be absolutely fine. If you put them then into the context of a 70-mile-an-hour multi-lane environment, they may be somewhat lacking in power, and to my mind that can be equally as dangerous as having too much power. You do need a certain amount of power to move yourself along within the context of other road users and busy traffic, and indeed to accelerate yourself carefully out of a situation. So you do want a little bit of power under your foot. So just when you're evaluating, a lot of people default to what's the fuel economy, what's the lowest tax bill I can get. But safety does require a certain amount of power. So assess what your driving needs will be. And then similarly with the transmission type. So as you can see here, this is a DSG gearbox, Volkswagen's direct shift gearbox. And often people just describe it simplistically as we're either going to have a manual gearbox, like in my Ford Focus training car, you get a manual license or an automatic license, and so it's quite a blunt instrument. But this type of twin clutch transmission, so Volkswagen's DSG, Fiat Group's TCT twin clutch system, are actually cogged gearboxes in the way that our manual gearbox would be, but instead of moving the stick and selecting the gears for yourself, computer systems do it for you. So you're getting effectively a manual gearbox being automatically controlled. So it's an automated manual gearbox rather than a traditional torque converter automatic. So there's quite a bit of misunderstanding about the technologies. For simplicity, it's marketed as either manual or automatic, but what you're actually getting can vary quite significantly. So it's understand the transmission and the benefits it gets. Certainly, my daughter learnt in a manual car, has a full manual license, and yet her preference would be for an automated manual gearbox, and it gives her lots of benefits and safety benefits, not least being able to keep her hands on the wheel at all time to control the car. Similarly, this car comes with hill hold assist, being an automated manual, but some manual gearboxes will have that functionality as well. So again, this sort of technology, the only downside to that for a new driver, it costs a little bit more, and they are fantastic systems, but they're complex bits of technology, so when they go wrong, they can go expensively wrong. So you just have to be aware of that if you're making that choice. And the same with engines. Various engines, do your research in terms of their reliability, as technology and particularly environmental enhancements have been rushed through in designs. It's only then in subsequent years that design flaws are discovered. So check for any engine you're considering obviously its fuel economy and its tax rating, but also do some research on forums and see the sort of common faults that are going wrong with that. And if it's a maintenance cycle fault, then make sure your car has had that element of maintenance done. Okay, so the other consideration which will typically come in when you're considering a small hatchback car is the decision on whether it's 3 or 5 doors. And generally that decision is viewed in terms of convenience of getting in and out, and styling features. So a lot of people think that a 3-door car is more stylish in its design. Now in our case, my daughter's perspective was very much she's about taking her friends with her, and so ease of access for them getting in and out was their key priority. And I guess my take on it from a dad's perspective is that in the event of something going wrong, I would think it's easier to exit from a 5-door car than it would be a 3-door car. Now I'm sure Ian Dunbar is far more of an expert on the subject of getting people out of cars, and I would imagine they'd cut a roof off a 3-door car as easy as they would a 5-door car if it got to that scenario. But in the bits before then, when you're waiting for emergency services to arrive, my personal view would be that being able to exit through back doors if your front seat passengers are not in a good condition would be helpful. So in that respect, we went for the 4-door model, but that was just our simple set of logic applied on that. Okay, so a lot of new cars now are actually dispensing with the traditional spare wheel, and they are replacing it with a tyre puncture repair sealant and a tyre inflator. That's largely being justified on the grounds of fuel economy, so you're not lugging around a heavy piece of metal which you rarely use, and I could also suggest that as a cost saving for manufacturers. However, there are some limitations to the tyre slime type puncture repair. It's fine for a small nail hole, but if the tyre has burst or had sidewall damage, that's no use to you and so can leave you stranded. So my personal preference was I actually had to get a replacement spare wheel because the car didn't come fitted with one. And the other thing that always concerns me is if this wheel well is empty in the event of a rear end shunt. Now I would assume that the manufacturers are selling cars without these tyres, so they must have done some form of crash testing, but to my simple layman's logic, having that additional material in there to absorb any impact, I would have thought would be beneficial to the crumple zone, but I haven't got anything to validate that. Okay, so one of the elements of a car which features quite high on the priority list for many young drivers would be its infotainment system, and as you can see in this car, we have the poverty spec infotainment system. This has no telephone connectivity whatsoever. It has got an aux-in socket. I haven't read the manual in detail on this one yet. It's got an aux-in socket, so you could probably make a telephone call back to the 1980s, but this has very little functionality. Kept it very, very simple. It's obviously a very complex area, and infotainment systems are evolving at a very rapid pace, and so the pace of technology development is outstripping legislation, how quickly laws can be passed, and so you must be very clear that what a manufacturer supplies you with doesn't in any way imply that it is safe. So just because somebody puts a touch screen or something in a car doesn't imply that it's safe, and they will put lots of disclaimers. They often flash up on the screen itself, and certainly in the owner's manual, highlighting that the owner's responsibility is with you as the driver to ensure that you use it at an appropriate time and safely. And so this again has been reinforced with the changes to the highway code from the 29th of January this year, 2022, H1 section, heightens the onus of responsibility on all of us as drivers to be looking out and taking care of vulnerable road users. So the starting premise in the event of a collision is that we shouldn't have been in collision with them. So what were we doing to have caused that collision? And we work back and apply any mitigating circumstances to that starting point. So my general guidance would be to be very, very careful. As I said, clearly you want some music and you want some entertainment, but read around the subject in detail. One area I would direct you to would be a case of Thomas Croker. If you go a web search for Thomas Croker, quite a horrific case which came about through scrolling through a phone touchscreen looking for a music playlist, wiped out as part of a family, and is currently serving a 10-year jail sentence for it. So as I say, as young drivers, where you'll be developing your observation skills, driving is new to you, it's a new skill set. It requires, as the highway code says, it does require concentration. So distractions from loud music or touch screens, telephone communication, be very, very careful in that area, I would suggest. And there are lots of things now, lots of pieces of technology which are helpful, and you've got to remember that technology drive our behaviours. So we're now constantly connected, and if somebody's 5 minutes late, it's, where are you? Where are you? We've got snap maps, things like that. If you want to know where somebody is, when you're friends, where are they? We just have a look at snap maps. We don't need to be texting and calling, saying I'm just going to be a few minutes late. Let's keep things in perspective. The most important thing when you're driving is to be thinking about that journey and getting there safely and arriving safely. So that would be my summary on those areas. Okay, so the other question I'm frequently asked would be my view on insurance black boxes. Would I recommend having an insurance black box fitted to a first car? Now, at this moment in time, all the enthusiastic young drivers in the audience actively willing me to give the right answer here. So let me give you my honest answer and my thoughts on the subject of insurance black box. Now, if you've invested in some decent quality driver coaching to DVSA standard, you will be driving to a good base level, and you'll have established some fundamental skills which are vitally important to good driving. And that focus will have been around smoothness of all the major controls, so your application of the gas pedal, your braking and your steering. And the objective will have been throughout that to keep the car nice and level and nice and balanced. And that is the fundamental foundation for more advanced level driving. Now, what tends to happen, quite naturally, we're all guilty of it, it's a natural sort of reaction. When you move away from a driving coach, and so you're driving without somebody to give you regular feedback, there is the temptation to get drawn along by the sensation of the car. So you push the gas pedal that little bit harder, and ooh, that feels nice. And you brake a little bit more harshly, and the car dips down on its nose. And again, you're a little bit more coarse. You're turning onto a corner. And so what you're doing there gradually is all the good habits you've developed, you're chipping away at bit by bit, and undermining all the good work you've done to this point, purely because you're not getting feedback from a driving coach. And so if you then have desires to go on to more advanced driver training, and you enjoy your cars, and you're looking ahead to getting more powerful cars, and you want to go on to what's broadly termed advanced and performance driving type situations, when you turn up to get this sort of coaching, first thing they're going to have to start doing is unpicking all the bad habits you've learnt by going a bit freestyle with your driving. So my view for an enthusiastic young driver is that actually a black box is your friend in those early formative development, when you're exploring the skills, your base skill level that you've developed. Having a black box to give you feedback, real-time feedback, is very, very helpful, because the telematics in the black box feature on all those forces. So as we said, accelerating forces which squat the car back, braking forces which put the car's mass on its nose, and the cornering forces. And so, as I say, if you're looking to do more progressive driving in more powerful cars, fundamental skill set you need there is what the black box is monitoring you on. So if the black box is giving you feedback and saying, well, that's a little bit harsh, that's useful feedback, and avoiding developing that bad habit at an early stage will make it much, much easier for you when you want to progress to more advanced driving. So on that level of driver development, I would say a black box is a very helpful thing in those first 6 to 12 months when you're first exploring driving without driving coach feedback. At an extreme level, and this applies to any driver, if you're getting it wrong, the key thing is, again, with driving, it's very, very difficult to self-evaluate. So you don't know you're getting it wrong until the day it goes badly wrong. And so again, in which case, if your insurance company's black box is highlighting to you, you're getting carried away with the sensation. You think, whoa, this braking feels great, and let's turn in, and whoa, that's exciting. It probably is exciting until the day it ends in an immovable tree, and then the world changes very rapidly. So on at an extreme level, when things do go badly wrong, it's really great to have had that feedback ahead of that and had somebody flag up to you that you're getting it a little bit wrong. So in summary of all that, I would think that an insurance black box is helpful if you use the telematics and the feedback you get from it in the way it's intended. It's actually a very cost-effective way of continuing your driver development, and fundamentally it will also reduce most insurance premiums, and a lot of insurance companies won't actually insure you without the black box. So probably all the way around, pretty good idea. Okay, so if you're still watching and you've made it this far through the video, well done. I hope you found it helpful and thought-provoking. As we said at the start, it's not going to give you an answer, only you can decide what car is right for you and your specific driving needs. But I hope it's illustrated some of the key areas, certainly, that we thought about in making narrowing down our consideration set of the cars that were available to us. So as I say, I hope you found it helpful. If you're interested in this specific model of Polo, I've got some other videos which I'll put links to of me driving it and giving my thoughts on how it performs relative to some of the other normal journalist reviews that you get on a car. But I've done a review on this specific engine in combination with this gearbox. So if you're interested in this particular car, you may find that helpful. But hope you enjoy your first car, whatever you decide to buy, and do drive it safely.